Welcome to this week's The Heart of It All, brought to you by RBC Wealth Management. It is clear that where we live and with whom as we age is the biggest concern. Today on the show, a woman who has come up with a creative solution that many have only dreamt about. Pat Dunn is the mastermind behind Senior Women Living Together. Yes, we have our very own Golden Girl on the pod today. Hi there, I'm Teri Hart, and this is The Heart of It All, a podcast all about the realities of caregiving. I do hope you are subscribing wherever you listen, and if you aren't, just tap that subscribe button now. I am so excited to talk to today's guest, a woman who found an incredible solution for herself and is now helping thousands of other women who are needing a place to live while the cost of living skyrockets and we have a housing crisis. RBC Wealth Management is helping to empower clients to navigate extended lifespans with confidence, resilience, and purpose by integrating financial expertise with a deeper understanding of aging, health, and family dynamics. This focus is driven by a commitment to what matters to clients, preparing for the complexities of aging with clarity and compassion. RBC Wealth Management knows that longer lifespans brings both opportunities and challenges that extend beyond traditional financial planning, and they understand that Canadians increasingly require and seek guidance on the broader realities of aging, including physical, cognitive, and social well-being, in addition to caregiving and care receiving, all of which can impact financial plans. One of the major things we have learned on this podcast is that where we live as we age and the choices our loved ones make, or even the options available to them, are some of the most important and sometimes stressful. In 2019, after years of her own struggles, Pat Dunn created Senior Women Living Together. Yes, it's a modern-day Golden Girls nonprofit agency that helps single senior women in Ontario looking for an alternative living arrangement. Listen, not all heroes wear capes, but my, oh my, Pat Dunn is a hero, and I welcome her here to the heart of it all. Pat, I am so pleased to have you here on the heart of it all with me. A big welcome.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I just always love to have an opportunity to talk about what we're doing and hopefully help more senior women.
All right, so let's get into it. In your previous life, you were a public health nurse. How did you find yourself in a precarious housing situation?
My husband and I decided to retire early, so we retired at 60, and we had been living on our boat. And so we decided to take the boat south into the Caribbean. We had a wonderful, wonderful trip. And the plan was to travel right down and through the Panama Canal. And I was really interested in going to the Galapagos Islands. So it was a big adventure, and I looked forward to it. But it did mean that I didn't work right through to 72 or whatever the age is now. I had a small pension, 13 years worth of pension from public health, but not a whole working life pension. So it wasn't that much. And then that was added to that was added my CPP and OAS. My husband died suddenly. I went in to wake him up for breakfast, and he was dead.
Oh, Pat, I'm
He,
so sorry.
he was 66. This isn't an unusual story. My story is not unusual at all. And, as the Eagles used to say, in a New York minute, everything can change. And that certainly was my experience. So I had to sell the boat. I couldn't manage the boat on my own. I came back to Canada and I had to start over. And so the first thing I did was look for rentals, and was stunned to find that my income wasn't sufficient to get anything decent. not luxurious. I wasn't looking for luxury. And so it scared me. And I had some investments, so I had to start using them to just to put a roof over my head. And after 4 years, I realized if something didn't change at the rate I was spending money on rent, um, I'd be homeless in 2 years. So I thought, okay, there's got to be a better way. And the lowest point in that journey, part of the journey, was I thought, well, I got to thinking, well, maybe I could live in my car through the summer and save enough to rent something decent in the winter. But that was a low point. I was I felt really ashamed, and I really don't think I I was guilty of anything, but I felt ashamed. And I wouldn't be able to build any community if you're living like that. How do I build friendships and things to do and stuff? So I thought, okay, at that time in 2019, there were houses for rent in Peterborough for around $2,000. Imagine that, a whole house, 4 bedroom. Not that long ago. That's how horrible the rental prices have tripled since then. So I thought, oh, well, if 4 women could live in a house. And it took me back in my mind to the Golden Girls show. And I thought, well, why not? Why not ask? And I was very naive at that point in terms of the statistics of how many women were struggling as I was. But I thought, well, I'll invite senior women in the Peterborough area where I live to meet in a Facebook group, and we'll start talking about this and how what would it look like? I had no idea either, or even what all the issues were. And at the end of the first week, I thought maybe in total I'd get 10 women. At the end of the first week, there were 50 in the group. At the end of the first month, there were 200. Yes, your expression tells it all. I was stunned. And I did some research, and at that time, as far as I could tell from reading Stats Canada graphs, um, there was something like 340,000 single senior women in Ontario living in poverty.
So, the first thing that I think is really important for people to understand, Pat, is how your situation and the clarity of which you speak and the New York minute of change of life that you reference, you are not unique. This is an epidemic.
And we've largely been ignored, and there's some very significant issues that fit into this because um, we, as women, we didn't always have pension kinds of jobs. We stayed home to raise kids. We maybe left a job in order to take care of our parents. You know this with caregiving. And so we lose all those years of potential pension from the government. As well, our jobs don't pay as well, so we wouldn't get as much as a man anyway. So to synthesize it there's a income gap, a gender income gap. We know that, and it's actually getting smaller. But the gender pension gap has not changed in 50 years. And men currently, the average male income is from government pensions is $10,000 a year more than women. Yeah.
That's extraordinary. So, okay, so I know people are gonna be listening and going, are these all women who don't have children? What about family? So talk to me about, I'm gonna ask you your personal situation because I think you're best to talk about that, Pat.
Yeah.
Do you have children? Where do they fit into the equation?
Yes, I have 2 children, grown children, obviously, but my daughter, my oldest, lives in Grand Cayman Island, lucky her, and my granddaughter, and she's they get along fine down there financially, but really, can't afford to take care of me too. And I have a son younger than her, and but he's developmentally handicapped, so he can't help me either. And you know what? I don't want them to have to help me. You know, I I I figured that's why I did what I part of the reason why I did what I did to create senior women living together, because from talking with all the women I talk to every day, that's what they wanted too. They didn't want to be uh, having to live off of their children or with their children. Yeah, and there's many also in our organization that never had children. There's many that never married, but divorce is kill off a lot of financial security too.
Can you outline some of the other benefits other than financial that this offers for senior women?
Yeah. So, you can imagine coming back from being in the Caribbean for 3 or 4 years, and I come back, and my friends are scattered all over. And you can't follow your friends around, and they're all busy with their own retirement lives. So there were two things. The financial was the most immediate problem, but the other problem was I had no community. I had no friendships. Um, I went from week to week to week, that first 3 or 4 years that after I came back, not talking to any other single person except for grocery clerks. I was absolutely, desperately, soul destroyingly lonely. And I remember sitting on the um, porch where I was living, looking at the sky one summer night, and I thought, this loneliness is going to kill me. And then I read that loneliness does kill you. And so I thought, oh, okay. So, yes, the secondary thing, as women started to join senior women living together, more and more we heard first, I feel like there's hope now. Second, I I can probably afford to live on my own till I die, but I don't want to anymore. I want to have companionship and fun with other women. I want a tribe, as the younger people say. And so, yeah, and then COVID, of course, highlighted two things. Living alone makes you more at risk for being put into a nursing home if something happens. And homes aren't a place many of us want to go to anymore, if ever. And COVID highlighted that. So a lot of women, even with higher income than the original women that joined, started to join us for that reason.
Okay, so before we get to the nuts and bolts, tell me, I'm sure people really want to hear the outcome of what started
Yeah.
this all. You looking for women in a Facebook group that you thought you would get 10. The first week there were 50, and by the first month you had 200 women. You must have felt very popular, Pat. All these folks wanting to live with you.
I felt grateful that I wasn't alone. That was my first feeling. Oh, I thought, oh, good. Isn't that awful? But I thought, oh, good. There's other people in my situation. Then I thought, oh, I can't just find some women to live with for myself. Now I have to help all these other women. So then I felt a little overwhelmed. So that, caused me to say to some of the other women in the original group that joined, let's get together and talk about how we can take this forward. And so we did, and we created Senior Women Living Together, and we incorporated as a nonprofit and started to build a program that would provide the basis for them to find women to live together. But I also found in the group two other women that I am now living with. So yeah, by it was February I started the group, and
What
by the
year?
summer of
February of what, Pat?
2019,
Thank you.
and yeah, so it's about 6 years now. Um, So we met in the group and started talking and decided that we'd like to live together. And so we've been living together since the fall of 2019, three of us in a house in Peterborough. And it's been great. It's funny. It's been great. You have to be realistic about these things. When you live with people, there are challenges.
So, how does it work? Let's walk
Ye-
us through it. So let's put me in the situation. How old do you have to be to apply to live with other people? Let's go through the criteria first.
You need to be single, either through divorce, choosing to be single, or through divorce or the death of a spouse. You can, and obviously female, but also if you identify as female. And then you need to be 55 or older, and living in Ontario, because currently we're only doing Ontario. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So we're 55. We are a woman or identify as a woman. We are looking to share a living space with other women. Is it a website application?
It's actually kind of similar to a dating website, I suppose, because of different questions and answers. But so it's kind of like that. You fill in a form that consists of your profile. So you answer some basic questions about yourself and your expectations. And then we have we have that database. And so then you go to, say, I live in Peterborough. So I would go to the Peterborough section and read the profiles of the other women that are there. So then we have a chat program, part of the website. So then you and I start chatting, get together, and then definitely we recommend everybody meets in person before, making that kind of a decision, because it's a life-altering decision for sure. What we put together is it's a social contract between the women living together that we call a homemate agreement.
I am fascinated by the homemade agreement. I love the
Yes.
homemade. I wish my husband and I had a homemade agreement before we moved in together.
It's actually one of the things we laugh about frequently is that first marriage I had might never have happened if I'd had a homemade agreement. So, yeah, it's very extensive. It goes through all the day-to-day living things that you would expect to have to agree on, like cooking and cleaning and washing dishes and all of that, shopping and whatnot. But we also have a section on managing our relationship. So, a homemate group would form 2, 3, usually 4. We haven't had more than 4 at a time yet. Um, Mostly because there's no rentals out there for more than 4 people.
Mhm.
Um, so they would meet and start going through this and make decisions. So everybody's homemade agreement looks different because it's based on them. And then there's a section on aging together because we're all older. Again, in a New York minute, I could be disabled by something. And then what do my homemates do? So before we get to those situations happening, you down in this section of the homemate agreement and discuss that. Like I might say, I'm happy to help out with somebody if they need help with meals or with, you know, um, driving them to appointments. I'm happy to do that. Another person might say, no, I really don't want to do it. I just spent 10 years nursing my husband. I don't want to do it. And that all becomes okay within the group managing it. So, so we talk about those things before you have a uh
Before you have a crisis.
before you have a crisis, but also before you have a relationship built with someone that you feel like you can't say no,
Isn't
right?
that key?
Yeah, so you see, now I'm helping my one of my homemates since we moved in. She's had both knees done, one hip done, her other hip needs doing, her shoulders got it. You know, we didn't anticipate any of that, and nor could you. But I had built already a relationship with her, like I saw her like a sister. We're very close. So, had I been of the frame of mind that I really didn't want to do any more caregiving and that had never been discussed, then I would feel like, how do I tell her I'm not gonna help her? How do I do that now? I love this woman. So, it's try to get that all done up front. And frankly, it's a bit of a challenge to get the women to realize how important that is to do.
It's like a prenup.
Mhm.
It's like a prenuptial that people tend to do in marriages for finances, but you're doing a prenup about caregiving.
There's nothing magical really about about the homemade agreement or anything proprietary or anything, it's just kinda common sense.
Are there certain people that this would just not be suitable for?
Yes. Yeah.
And they are?
Well, you need to have fairly good communication skills and insight. So the first place, you wanna look when something's not going well in the house or in a relationship is what we generally do is we point the finger. You have to be able to point it here first. What do I need to do different to make this relationship better? And imagine again, that's not really rocket science, and we kinda all know that. But, so, so
What I found is knowing and behavior sometimes are very different
very,
ideas. And I
very
say that
different.
about myself.
Yeah, me too. So, yeah, so it's good if you have a pretty good sense of yourself and are, pretty clear on what you want, and, willing to communicate that, with the others. So, boundaries, they're always an issue in every relationship. The boundaries in these homemate groups is sometimes harder to define right away, than it is with other relationships, but, my bedroom's my private space. You don't come in here. No. Period. I don't wanna put a lock on my door. I wanna have homemates I can trust. So I just don't come in my room. So the homemade agreement is a fluid document, can be changed in moments at any moment, at any time that fits to the homemade group, and it's intended to be discussed on a regular basis. So if all you do is get together and say, "How's everything going?" Everybody says, "Yeah," maybe a glass of wine after dinner, whatever, and, and then everybody says, "No, things are all good." "Okay, great, congratulations, good for us." You move on. Or you sit down and, "We've gotta fix this problem," or "We have this problem, and we've gotta figure out a way around it." You don't really know someone till you live with them. And, on the other hand, there's always that expression, um, familiarity breeds contempt, and
Mhm.
I've always struggled with that anyway, because, my parents, I had great parents, and they were married till they died, um, and, they had a great marriage, and that was a lot of familiarity, 60 years, but they never had contempt for each other, ever. So, I don't believe that it's true that familiarity always breeds contempt, but it can.
I think in the answer to who this would not be well suited for, you also answered who would be well suited for it.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
is there anything you would like to add about that? Who is well suited for this
Yeah,
dynamic?
people that are, women that tend to be more adventurous, have tried other things in life with some, willingness to take some risk. There's always risk in life. You can stay in your one-bedroom apartment and, 2 months later, the the owner decides he's gonna sell it and you're out. You could get rent evicted. There's nothing that's, safe, and secure, really. This is probably the safest and securest you can get.
So the financial component, Pat, is that also part of the homemade agreement?
Yes. So,
Like we're going to
yes,
share
that's
coffee
actually
and tea.
yeah, condiments, that sort of thing. How do we share, uh, all of the things and, toilet paper costs and, all of that? There's no right answer to any of this. It depends on the group. So these are just the things you need to think about. Um, how do we get the rent paid? Some landlords they don't want to get 4 different checks or 4 different, e-transfers for rent. They want it to come in one. So you might designate one person in the household to, send her the money and then she sends the full thing. So it's all covered.
Not only did you find a solution for yourself, find a solution for hundreds of other women, create a job for yourself, but you've also uncovered a segment of the population that is in so desperate need of advocacy.
Mm.
What has this unveiled in your life about the problems single women are finding in the housing market and how ignored that population is and how much we need to be banging the pots and pans and making people recognize the problem we have?
I never anticipated, getting involved in advocacy, and one thing we talked about at the board of directors was because advocacy has to be done well, and it's a science and an art all in and of itself to do it well. And so we decided that we wouldn't make advocacy itself a goal of our organization, but rather we would partner well with organizations that are already doing a great job. So yeah, we partner with Single Seniors for Tax Fairness because that's another issue, financial issue. Single people spend more on taxes than couples do. And then Seniors for Social Action Ontario. I don't know if you've ever talked to Trish there. She's amazing.
Do you actually help people find housing? Are you actually a real estate agent as well?
No, when we first started, it was all, and the platform, our program, everything is we provide the space, the place, the information, all the way through the process of your finding homemates. We have oodles of blog posts and conversations about how to find the most compatible person and how do you know if they're compatible. Our plan was always that that's kind of where we stopped because then the homemate groups would form and they'd go out together and find a place to live. So, and for a few years that worked. Then COVID happened. Well, COVID happened almost right away. But the results of COVID and the horrible increase in rents, the tripling of the rents, it's ridiculous. Um, then these homemade groups were getting all excited. They decide to live together. Everybody was all excited and they couldn't find anywhere that was affordable, even when they were sharing the rent. So, and that was partly because the rents were high and also because there was literally nothing for rent a lot of places in Ontario. So nothing in the market at all. So anyway, so we thought, okay, well, we have to start looking at this then, and how do we help with that? So we started talking with private landlords and kind of, I suppose, vetting them in a way to check to make sure that they weren't, deciding going to flip the house in a year and a half or, going to increase the rent too much because we're all on fixed incomes and we can't have the rent going up, exploding up every year. So we have to have landlords that are willing to stick to the rent control, 2.5% or whatever per year. But we have a lot to offer a landlord because we're great tenants. And once we move in there, we're not probably going to move out because it's so expensive to move, and where would we go? And so we dig ourselves into the fabric of the neighborhoods too, because we like that. We go to the local church, we shop at all the local things, and and we're good neighbors.
One of the things that we will be doing an episode on here on the Heart of It All, but we've talked about are NORCs, naturally occurring retirement communities. And like this just seems like such a beautiful fit. Is that something, Pat, that is an area that you see opportunities for your community?
The NORCs typically are existing apartment buildings that happen to be filled with mostly seniors. And what we're doing, of course, is smaller than that. So we have, 2 and 3 and 4 people living together. But still, it's naturally occurring, and it's retirement age, and we have the same needs as the people that are living in the larger units. So yeah, we need sort of a critical mass, I think, before we can really go to those organizations and say, well, we would like to have the same kind of services that you're getting in these, houses across the province.
How many places now in Ontario are you matchmaking? Are you housemate matchmaking?
Well, we're open to anyone in Ontario that meets the criteria to join, and then we start setting them up in groups of from where they live or where they want to live, because some joined from Ottawa want to move to Peterborough. And so, we've now housed 75 women through this. It's
75 women.
uh yeah, it's actually, other people get excited. I'm disappointed because I think it should be about 7,000 women but by now. But that's me.
What have you learned in these 6 years about where we have gone wrong in society about housing for our seniors and specifically our senior women?
The financialization of housing started, when post-war, and I had just been born. There was great housing. Just oodles of housing was built and built, for everybody, and by the government. And then that just over time started to change. And in the 90s, I believe, in the late 80s, 90s, the federal government downloaded um, affordable housing to the provinces. And subsequent to that, the provinces downloaded it to the municipalities. But there was no oversight, there was no extra infrastructure for those downloads. Now, a whole um, uh, business model for being renters, for renting to people, right? So they're called REITs, real estate investment trusts, and their whole purpose is to make money for their stockholders. So, if you've been the victim of a rent eviction or a sudden eviction, an illegal eviction, a lot of the times it comes from um, that way of thinking, that we have to make money at this. We can't just get by. We have to make lots of money. And that financialized it. And then that even over same kind of thinking went into the private landlord market as well, where, no, I should be making more money at this. I should be making, I should be able to have, this should be my career. I'll buy a second house and live in this one, and I'll rent that one, and then I'll buy another one, and so on and so on, and build my portfolio. But of course, you have to make money for that. You have to constantly have mortgages. And sometimes frequently, they the mortgages were so high that they couldn't possibly rent it for less. So that's another reason why I talk to landlords before we start working with them. And many, many are not like that. I mean, I really want to stress that many are not like that. But as a whole, as a country, we allowed all that to happen. All that, making housing a business instead of a right
A basic need.
and a basic need. Yeah.
Do you have clarity on what you've done here, and how proud are you of yourself?
Um, it's funny. I am very proud of myself, and I don't feel like I'm bragging when I say that. I think I've made a difference in the world. It was intentional. When I said the same night I talked about earlier, where I looked at the sky and thought this loneliness is going to kill me, I thought, universe, give me something to do, so I'm too busy to worry about myself all the time. And a year later, I was too busy to even eat some days with what the universe gave me. So, I don't know if you look at it from the universe or God or whatever. I was intentional about it, and I wanted to have. If I was going to be unmarried and I couldn't have my husband anymore, then I was going to have work that made a difference in the world. On the other hand, uh, on the other hand, um, it's um, it's humbling to work with all these women, to talk with all these women, to hear their stories. My story is actually good compared to many of them. Some actually did and are living in their cars. So there's always that, which is good. It's good for to know that that's happening. Not that it is happening, but that it's good to know about it because you know, um, pride is not going to make this work or happen or go into the future. Pride isn't going to do it. Humility is.
Those are really, really wonderful words to end this on. Pat Dunn, thank you so much for what you've done. Thank you so much for what you're doing in the future. And thank you incredibly for being here on the heart of it all, because you are busy, woman.
Yes, I am. Yeah, too busy some days, but hey, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
The benefits of this are truly innumerable, and you cannot imagine the long-term impact of companionship. Thank goodness for Pat Dunn and her organization. And thanks so much to our sponsor, RBC Wealth Management. Thank you for listening week in and week out. We are loving the community we are creating here. Join us online. We are on all of the social media channels. Jess and Carrie from 6 of 1 Digital are my co-producers and co-pilots on the heart of it all. We do drop new episodes each and every Tuesday, and it's a great idea to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for being here this week, and please take care. The memes are plentiful, the references are never ending, but what's most important is that The Golden Girls is actually a fantastic show. 7 seasons of Dorothy, Blanche, Rose, and Sophia, the innuendo, the barbs, the love, and yeah, even times the conflict. There are few shows that actually age well, but there's something about the Golden Girls concept that just grows in popularity. Is it time for a reboot? Watch The Golden Girls. It truly is fantastic.